There are 6 different races in Bloxfruits, but which race is actually the best? Well, I'm going to rank every single one of them to find out which ones suck and which race is actually number 1. Let's start with Angel, the most overrated and most broken race in all Bloxfruits. I mean, you stun your enemies, you can't be comboed, you look amazing, and you can even fly. This is definitely an S tier race, right? Wrong. Angel's V4 is insanely overpowered, but its passive abilities, such as its V2 passive that enhances your sky jumps, are overwhelmingly mid. Its V3 also isn't necessarily the most overpowered thing in the world. Angel's V4 is completely broken, but it's kind of mid without it. Because of that, I'm going to place it 4th on the tier list. However, it's easily number 1 when its V4 is activated. Next up is Shark. This race was once the most toxic race in the entire game due to how tanky it was. But because it got to a point where the race was literally unkillable, the devs decided to nerf the living shit out of it, which caused its complete fall and turned it into the terrible race it is today. Unless you're a 2.5 million player who spams the V3 to survive, you should know that Shark is the worst race. Like, it's at a certain point where there is a massive gap between the 5-ish best race and Shark. Yay. That's how bad it is. Because of that, I am putting Shark in 6th and adding a massive gap as well. Cyborg. I personally feel that this is the most overused race in the entire game, but for good reason. Its passive gives energy upon taking damage and 10% defense against all sword, melee, and gun attacks. Its V3, which is actually the best thing about Cyborg, gives 30% defense, allowing you to tank very effectively. There was a point in time where this was so absurd, people started making Cyborg-proof combos because of how strong the V3 ability actually was. Aside from that, the V3 also gives an AoE tick damage that scales off of your level. Dealing all 6.5 seconds worth of tick damage will grant you around an extra 5k damage. This AoE tick also breaks Ken. However, you can still Ken trick through it occasionally. Cyborg's V4 isn't all that great and is by far the most glazed one in the entire game. In a 1v1 scenario, you only have the tick damage and your super jump, and the tick isn't all that good outside of it disabling held moves. On top of that, because this tick drains Ken instead of breaking it, it actually gives you something called dodge frames. These frames allow you to dodge certain moves that you normally wouldn't be able to, because it activates your Ken dodge at the same time that your Ken would normally be broken. You can dodge things like Spirit Fee with these dodge frames. Regardless, Cyborg is still by far the most well-built race. Because of that, I'm going to put it 1st on the tier list. It having a very strong offense and a very strong defense is what gives it the number 1 spot. This does not mean it's significantly better than the other races, though in certain PvP scenarios, other races can easily overwhelm, or even be better than Cyborg. Mink. I think most people can agree that this race is not number 1, unless you're one of those egotistical, nerdy, cringe, skilled PvP losers who swear up and down that things like Paw and Acid Rifle are super OP. Yay, Mink's all speed. This allows you to be harder to hit and just be faster in general, whether it's a faster combo or just running. Faster, however, its speed isn't immense to the point where you are completely unhittable, especially with all the AoE moves in the game. Most of the other races are generally better overall, as they also give speed and a variety of other buffs as well. Depending on your playstyle, Mink can be the most trash race to exist, but it can also be one of the hardest things to kill due to being able to speed blitz your opponents. Its V4 also isn't that good giving tornadoes and a super dash. The super dash tends to be better than the tornado gear. But overall, Mink is no longer a top race like it once was before dashes were reworked, which Shadow nerfed them. Because of this, Mink is going into the number 5 spot on the tier list, above Garbage V4, but underneath everything else. Human. I think everyone can agree when I say this is the most underrated race of all time. It's extremely underused for how powerful it is, but that's probably because it doesn't have any defense buffs. In terms of abilities, Human by far has the best PvP passives, including an increase in movement speed, a doubled flash step range, with its cooldown being lowered from 15 seconds to 10 seconds. You can even get this down to 7 seconds by equipping the Kitsune ribbon accessory. Aside from that, you also get an extra Ken dodge, as well as Ken dodges recharging faster, and a slight speed boost. Its V3 ability is where Human lacks though. Depending on your health, You get a damage buff, with the lowest being 2.5% damage and the highest being 52.25% damage. This ability is only strong when you're near death, hence why it's called Last Resort, since it's supposed to be your last option / your trump card. Its V4, however, is extremely powerful, giving 3 flash steps and bringing the already low 10-second cooldown down to around 7 seconds. Stacking Kitsune Ribbon on this will bring you down to a flash step every 5 seconds, which is very broken. If you do not already know, this V4 also gives you stun immunity whilst holding down skills. This can be very effective and gives you priority with any move that has iframes or invincibility frames. You also get a rage meter. It goes from 0 to 150, with 0 being no extra damage, 50 being a times 1.5 multiplier, 100 being a times 2 multiplier, and 150 being a times 2.5 multiplier. Because human gives priority over stun moves and has absurd mobility that isn't limited to ground like Cyborg, and can move both vertically and horizontally, unlike Mink, I am going to put human in number 2 spot. Ghoul. This race is considered both good and bad amongst the community. However, my personal opinion on it is different. This race is easily one of the strongest in the game, having the second best passive abilities behind human. It gives a speed buff and faster health regeneration than any other race. However, this is only activated during nighttime. You also have 25% life leech on your melee skills. This is enough to rank it above any of the races below it. Its V3 ability being one of, if not the best tool in any race, giving a minimal amount of speed, damage, and defense, as well as allowing you to use skills that are still on 40% or less cooldown. The cooldown reduction is Ghoul's main gimmick, and why it's so good. It allows you to be the most aggressive player in the lobby due to not having to wait for your skills to come back, and allows you to create infinite or very long combos. Its V4 just makes this even stronger, reducing all cooldowns by 40%, and still allowing you to stack the V3 on top of it, reducing your skills cooldown by 80%. You also get life leech on all attacks, with tier 1 still being 25%. Life leech just applied to all attacks. The amount for tier 2 is not confirmed. In V4, all Ghoul nighttime passive abilities are activated regardless if it's daytime or not. You also get crows that deal a small amount of damage. However, the crows can easily drain enemies' Ken, which is what makes it insanely powerful, because this race gives everything, including speed, damage, defense, life leech, has the ability to Ken drain, and extremely reduces cooldowns. I'm going to put this race in the number 2 spot, tied with human. Overall, every race besides Shark is good. Angel being pretty trash without V4, but considerably better than anything else with its V4. Ghoul and human both being extremely strong, with and without V4, and Cyborg being stronger simply because of how well built it is. But it also allows your opponent to use your own passives against you, as we saw with Dodge Frames. There's no objective number 1 race that's completely better than everything else. It all comes down to your playstyle. If you love spamming, use Angel or Shark. If you hate Kentrickers, use Cyborg. If you want the element of surprise, go with human. Ghoul's great for any type of player since it's so versatile. Remember, this is only my opinion on what race is truly the best.